Du Spring Vigil at the Imperial Chancery. Shy flowers shelter by the wall at dusk. Birds chatter, flying home to roost. Stars appear, 10,000 doorways open. The moon climbs to its zenith in the sky. Sleepless, I listen for the clash of keys. Imagine every wind sound is the clink of jade. Tomorrow's my petition with the Emperor. Time after time I ask the night, how long? So here we get another of Du Fu's poems. So what is this poem about? Well, first we should, to understand this poem, we need a little bit of contextual explanation. So I think we've already mentioned before that during the Anlushan rebellion, Du Fu managed to escape from the capital, which had fallen into the hands of the rebels, and he made the long march to where the new emperor, Su was seated in Fengxiang to the northwest. And he was rewarded with a post in the Chancellery. The Chancellery was one of the big three state departments of Tang China. It was the least important of the three, but it was still one of the great three after the Department of State Affairs and the Secretariat. And mainly the Chancellery served to revise the decisions and the proposals that were made by the Secretariat. Now, Du Fu's post was a minor one at the Chancellery. He was made a left reminder, and which one of the lowest posts there. And one of the duties of the reminder, as the name suggests, was to remind the emperor through memorials or through speaking of omissions of important things that the other bureaucrats or that the emperor himself might have forgotten and that might be important. From what I've read, at the time of the Tang Dynasty and at this moment, this office was mainly ceremonial. Most reminders were not expected to do that. But Du Fu, as you will remember, he is, a very serious Confucian. And in fact, he was constantly presenting memorials to the emperor. And he probably became a bit of a nuisance. And that would probably go quite a long way to explain why about a year or so after the composition of this poem, he was sent to the provinces. So all of this background for what? Well, this poem explains us one of the nights that Du Fu spends in the Imperial Chancellery. He doesn't leave his office, as all officials generally did at nightfall. He decides to stay in so that first thing in the morning he can attend the morning levee. Every morning, the main civil servants had an official meeting with the emperor, 5-6 o'clock in the morning, and there they could present memorials and things like that, which is what Du Fu wants to do. So he wants to be sure that he will be there on time to be able to attend this imperial levee. So the topic is, I don't know, you could say duty, serving the emperor. It's describing a personal episode in Du Fu's life, probably an episode that was repeated many times. Probably this wasn't the only time in which he spent the night in his offices so that he could present a memorial early in the morning. But serving the empire, an example of loyalty, an example of doing one's duty, of striving to serve the emperor. At the same time, as a minor topic, we get a little glimpse at the Imperial Palace. We've talked about the Imperial Palace before. It had, many different pavilions and gates and structures, but basically you could divide it into two areas. There is you could say the outer palace, which was the region really where the bureaucrats were working, with the bureaucratic offices of the state. So this part of the palace was not so much the emperor's residence, but the seat of government, and it included the big pavilions where the emperor had public events, banquets, and rituals with his officials and with foreigners. And then there's the inner palace, which is closed to all except the eunuchs, the emperor and his concubines and the favorites. And we get some echoes of that inner closed palace, which is closed out from the outer palace where Du Fu is staying. Okay then, so as usual, let's take a look at the poem bit by bit. This is a typical parallelistic, that is a pentasyllabic regulated poem with parallelistic couplets in the second and the third. I think here the first one also looks quite parallel. I would have to look at the original, but it looks quite parallel as well. Shy flowers shelter by the wall at dusk. Birds chatter, flying home to roost. So the poem starts with a pure image of nature, of the flowers and the birds that are seen by Du Fu in the late evening from the Chancery building. Of course, these are not just sights of nature. I would imagine that the flowers sheltering by the wall, the birds flying home to roost, are indicating both the end of the day, and in a way they might be echoing the different decisions about what to do at the end of the day that the civil servants here are doing. Some, the shy flowers like Du Fu, will shelter in the wall, that is, they will stay inside. While others, the birds, most of the civil servants, will leave the palace to come back at dawn the next day. So this was at dusk. The next couplet introduces us into full nighttime mode. Stars appear, 10,000 doorways open. The moon climbs to its zenith in the sky. So now it's full nighttime. We get a vision of moon and stars. You know, the heaven is studded with stars. The moon has risen and it's out. And 10,000 doorways open. I imagine these 10,000, this is a hyperbolic number, but it refers to the doorways in the inner palace where the emperor, the eunuchs, and the concubines are moving around and traveling from here to there. Those doors are open, but they are, of course, closed for a civil servant like Du Fu. Sleepless, I listen for the clash of keys. Imagine every wind sound in the clink of jade. So we move now further on. Probably it's very late at night or almost dawn. Du Fu is sleepless, as he says. He is anxious to hear the first stirrings of dawn and the beginning of the preparations for the morning levee. He is impatient to be on time and to be able to present his memorial. He is listening for the clash of keys, perhaps the keys that should open the doors of the Forbidden City and of the pavilion where the emperor is going to show himself in the morning, yeah? or the outer doors of the palace that should allow in the civil servants that come for the counting that will take place before the levee. And he also imagines in every wind sound the clink of jade. I imagine this jade refers to the jade stirrups that perhaps some aristocrats or high-placed civil servants would have in their horses while they were entering for the morning levee. Anyway, two palatial images, clashing of keys, clinking of jade, that both hint at the luxury and the surroundings, being the Imperial Palace, but at the same time hint at the impatient nature, the anxiety of Du Fu for starting on his business, the business for which he has stayed at the Chancery all night long. Final couplet clarifies what we have been discussing until now. What is the purpose, what is the reason for Du Fu staying all night inside the Imperial Palace? Or rather, inside his clerical quarters in the Imperial Palace. Tomorrow is my petition with the Emperor. Time after time, I ask the night, how long? So here we get a clarification, if you wish, of the previous couplet. That is to say, the reason why Du Fu is at the palace, but also his impatience. Yeah? His impatience was hinted in the previous couplet by the fact that any sound made him think, made him feel that it was time for the levee, even though it's probably late at night. Still too late or too early, as you might prefer to focus it for the morning audience. But anyway, he is determined to present his memorial. He is determined to be on time. He keeps asking, perhaps he keeps asking other civil servants or people who might be at this nighttime chancellery. Perhaps he is consulting the clepsydra. There was a famous water clock that gave the hours at night inside the Imperial Palace. But anyway, he is impatiently brooding, asking, inquiring, how long more until he is able at last to do his duty. So, okay, not a bad poem. I mean, the topic is not particularly lovable or empathetic, except for duty, doing, the dutiful officer doing what he should do, which is the topic that does resound with me. I like dutiful officers, dutiful civil servants. And I would like to consider myself one as well. And okay, some of the images are interesting, but as usual with a lot of Du Fu's poems, the charm, at least in translation, of course, in the original, the charm would be, in the original, the charm, or part of the charm would be how effortlessly it seems Du Fu is able, with a relatively plain language, and by submitting to the very harsh rules of antithetic parallelism, which in this poem are employed in the first three couplets, not just in the middle two, how he is able to make such an artificial contraption feel natural, sound natural, and be subjectively expressive of thoughts and feelings of Du Fu. Now, in translation, of course, we lose all that, but you can still appreciate from the typical Western Romantic perspective the real person behind this poem. That is, a real personality, not just a poetic persona, a mask, a cliche. The real Du Fu as a buggering, annoying nuisance of a memorial presenter, coming through the pages and the words and showing himself in a literary life. So, not bad, not bad.